We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 89b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a brisa which brought the dimensions of various kinds of scales. It didn't mention what kind of scale was the largest kind of scale, so the Gemara asked on the previous summit, what kind of scale were we talking about? And the Gemara now says, Amar Papa says that Degromi, we're talking about the scales of a blacksmith. Those are the larger kinds of scales. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Mani Bar Patish says, Kederach Shamru Linyan Isurin, Kach Amru Linyan Tumasan. Just like we say those dimensions when it comes to the prohibitions, they have to be a certain size, the scales. So too when it comes to Tumma, it's only considered a vessel if it's in these dimensions, and then it's Mekabel Tumma. And the Gemara says, My Kamashmal, and well, what's Rav Mani Bar Patish teaching us? Tanina, we already learned this in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Meseches Kalim, Chutam Aznaim Shal Chenvani V'Shal Balibatim Tefach. Again, it says the size of the scales of the storekeepers and the Balabatim, the private individuals, is one Tefach, and so therefore we already know the size of a Tefach. And the Gemara says, Kana umisna shalo itzrichalei delotnan. The chiddush over here is, this applies also to the rod in the middle of the scale and the strings which hang from there. We also gave those dimensions as well, apply to Tumah. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Ein osin mishkalos lo shel bats. You can't make weights not out of tin, velo shel aver, not out of lead, velo shel gistro, not out of metal alloy, velo shel sha'ar, meaning matochas, not out of other kinds of metal. The idea is that these deteriorate, therefore they don't make good weights, good measures. Aval osahu shel tzunma v'shel zechuchis. However, you could make it out of rock or out of glass. That is good to use as weights. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Ein osin hamechek shel dalas. You can't make the leveler. That refers to the leveler when you have a heap that's over the top of a vessel. You want to smooth it out. You can't make that out of dalas, out of gourd. Mimnei shu kal, that's too light. V'lo shel matchas, you can't make it out of metal. Mimnei shu machbid, because that's too heavy. It has to be the right weight. Avaloseo shel zayas v'shel egos shel shikma v'shel eshberoa. But you can make the leveler out of wood from a zayas, from an olive tree, or from an egos, from a nut tree, or from a shikma, from a sycamore tree, or from an eshberoa, from a boxwood tree. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, you can't have the leveler be one side thick and be one side thin, because it won't level in an even fashion. Lo yimchok bevasachas, you shouldn't level all at once. Shamochik bevasachas ra lamocher v'yafel lokech. If you do it all at once, so then that's bad for the seller and it's good for the buyer. V'lo yimchok ma'at, but you shouldn't do it little by little either. Shara lokech, because that's bad for the buyer. V'yafel lamocher, and that's good for the seller. And the Gemara continues, Al kulan amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and all of these kinds of statements, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would say, Oili im omer, oili im lo omer. Woe to me if I say this, but woe to me if I don't say it. Im omer, if I say it, shema yilmedu haramoin, because then the cheaters will learn how to cheat from what I'm saying not to do. They'll learn what they want to do. V'im lo omer, but if I don't say it, shema yomru haramoin, maybe the cheaters will say, Ein talmidei chachamim bikiyin b'ma'aseh yadenu, that the talmidei chacham aren't experts in what we do. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Amra o lo Amra. So in the end, did he say it, or did he not say it publicly? And the Gemara says, Amar of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, or Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak says, Amra, he did say it publicly. Omehai kro Amra, he said it based on the following pasuk, Ki yesharim darchei Hashem, because the ways of Hashem are straight. But tzadikim yelchu bam, the tzadikim go in them. Uposhim yikashlu bam, but the sinners, they stumble over them. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Lo sasu aval b'mishpat b'mida b'mishkol v'mesura. It says you shouldn't be corrupt in different kinds of measures, and the Gemara wants to darshan each kind. B'mida, what does it mean? B'mida zu medidas karka, that refers to measuring land. Shalo yimdod le'echad b'mos hachamu le'echad b'mos hagashamim. You shouldn't measure for one person in the summer season, the other person in the rainy season. The idea is that the rope is saturated, it's a little longer in the rainy season, so then it will not be done evenly. And the Brisa continues, by mishkol, what does it mean by mishkol? Shalo yatman mishkolosa b'melech, a person shouldn't bury his weights in salt, that causes the measures to not be accurate. And by mesura, what does it mean by mesura? Shalo yarsiach, that refers to measuring liquids. You shouldn't pour it in a way where it foams, and then the buyer is not getting the right amount of liquid. And the Brisa continues, v'kal v'chomer, we can make the following kal v'chomer. Uma mesura shi'echad mishloshim v'shisha belug, if mesura, which is just 1/36 of a lug, a small amount, hikpida olav Torah, the Torah is makbid about it, kal v'chomer lehin v'chatzi yin v'shlishas ahin u'revias ahin v'lug v'chatzi lug u'revias v'chatzi tuman v'uchla, kal v'chomer to all these other kinds of measures. These are amounts, hin, half a hin, a third a hin, etc. Kal v'chomer, that we should be strict about this. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Asr l'adam sheyisha mida chasera o yesera b'soch beis. So a person can't keep a measure that's too small or too large inside his house. If it's not accurate, you can't keep it in the house. V'afilu ovid shel meimei raglaim. Even if you're just using it as a chamber pot for urine, you're not even using it for measuring purposes, it cannot be in the house. And the Gemara continues, Amar Papa. Papa says, Lo amar el bi'asr de lo chasimi. That's only true in a place where they don't stamp the measures. Avol bi'asr de chasimi, but in a place where they stamp the measures, ilo chazi chasim. If the buyer doesn't see a stamp, lo shakel, he won't take it, so it's not an issue. Or bi'asr de lo chasimi nami, and even in a place where they don't stamp, lo amar el de lo mahandasi. That's only true if it's in a place where there's no inspectors who make sure that the measures are good. Avol mahandasi les lanba, but if you have inspectors, there is no issue. But the Gemara says veloi, but it's not really true. There still is an issue because zimnin de mikri ben hashmasha. Sometimes ben hashmashas is coming, it's getting late to mikri v'shakel, and so therefore the person will just take it without checking for the proper stamp or the fact that it was inspected properly, and so therefore you could have a problem. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Namihachi, we have a brisa like this as well. Lo yisha adam mida chasera yisera b'soch beis. A person should not have in his house a measure that is too small or too large. V'afilu hi ovid shel meimei raglaim, even if it's used as a chamber pot for urine. Aval usu saw tirka v'chatzi tirka v'kav v'chatzi kav v'rova v'tuman v'chatzi tuman. But he should have in his house the following measures: a sa'ah, a tirkav, a half a tirkav, a kav, a half a kav, a quarter of a kav, a tuman, a half a tuman. These are various measures, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Amud Aleph.